A few for Wales and Northern Ireland too, but much of the south and east having a largely dry afternoon. A fresher feel, temperatures mostly in the mid-teens at best, and similarly on Wednesday. The wind's a little lighter on Wednesday. Much of central and eastern England looking dry and bright, but more wet weather coming into northern Scotland and then further south along the west coast. That rain could be quite heavy and could cause a little disruption coming into Northern Ireland later on too. Further south, most places dry and bright, just the odd shower. And again, temperatures mostly in the mid to high teens.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. Coming up in My Big Opinion, I've written Rishi Sunak's keynote speech for conference so he doesn't have to. My manifesto to put the great back into Britain. Yes, folks, I'll get reaction to my manifesto. That's right, I've written Sunak's speech. You won't want to miss it. But what do my panel think? Tonight, Carol Malone, Matthew Larzer and Belinda DeLucy. Then, as Jeremy Hunt declares war on the work-shy, has Britain become the lazy man of Europe again? We'll debate that in The Clash with Neil Hamilton and Anna May Mangan. Plus, as Nigel Farage appears at the Tory party conference to a rapturous reception, is it time for the right to come together to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? Well, I'll be asking the leader of Reform UK, very much a kingmaker potentially at the next election, Richard Tice. Also, after being cancelled by students, top professor Eric Kaufman has launched a university course to combat woke ideology. He tells us more live in the studio shortly. We'll also bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and I'll be sitting down with Fleet Street icon Kelvin Mackenzie. Sparks will fly. A busy 2 hours to come. Big opinion, big debate, and a touch of entertainment along the way. You are watching GB News, Britain's news channel. My big opinion is on the way. I have written Rishi Sunak's speech so he doesn't have to. Let's hope he's listening. That's after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. Well, the top story on GB News tonight is that the Greater Manchester Mayor says axing the northern section of HS2 would be the desperate act of a dying government. That, as a Number 10 source told GB News earlier on today, that no firm decisions have yet been taken. But Andy Burnham has called on the Prime Minister to end the shambles on HS2, following increased speculation about the rail project's future and a number of government ministers calling for the project to be reviewed due to spiralling costs. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says it shouldn't cost 10 times more to build a railway in the UK than just across the Channel in France. And the Chancellor also announced today plans to freeze the expansion of the civil service and reduce its numbers to pre-pandemic levels. During his speech at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester today, Jeremy Hunt said it would save the government £1 billion a year. Meanwhile, the Chancellor announced tougher benefit sanctions on those who are capable of working but choose not to, and he announced a national living wage rise to £11 an hour.
We promised in our manifesto to raise the national living wage to 2/3 of median income, ending low pay in this country. At the moment, it's £10.42 an hour, and we're waiting for the Low Pay Commission to tell us next year's recommendation. But I confirm today, whatever that recommendation, we'll increase the national living wage to at least £11 an hour next year. That's a pay rise for 2 million workers.
Well, at the same conference, Liz Truss called on the Chancellor to cut corporation tax from 25% back down to 19% in his next autumn statement. Speaking at a fringe rally, the former Prime Minister urged the Tory leadership to axe the tax, cut bills and build homes. Her comments came after Jeremy Hunt told GB News no substantial tax cuts were possible this year. Ms Truss said businesses, though, are choosing not to locate in the UK and they shouldn't be treated like a cash cow. Now, away from politics, a second police force is investigating allegations against the comedian Russell Brand. In a statement, Thames Valley Police said it's received new information relating to harassment and stalking allegations dating back to 2018. They added it would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation. It follows a joint investigation by the Sunday Times and Channel 4. Russell Brand denies all accusations of criminality. And lastly tonight, thunderstorms are set to batter the country tonight. The Met Office issuing a yellow weather warning for areas right across the UK, from Manchester and Birmingham right down to London and Southampton. Currently, there are 24 flood warnings in place, mainly in East Anglia, and the Met Office has warned of intense downpours, lightning and gusty winds. Downpours expected as well. We understand for the rest of the week, yellow weather warnings in place until Friday. Autumn has arrived. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for my alternative Rishi Sunak speech to conference. I've written it so he doesn't have to. Let's hope he's listening. Conference. I have a simple goal, which is to reclaim the best aspects of our past and the things that many of you feel we've lost, whilst also striding confidently into the future, seeking new opportunities. So I'm here to restore and to revive. To restore starts with our values. Fundamentals like the family, respect for the law, self-responsibility and free speech. No one should lose their bank account, lose their job or be publicly demonised for their legally held views. We've got to go back to a time when people could have different opinions, and that wasn't just accepted, but embraced. It's time to end the age of intolerance and the cancer of cancel culture. which is why I'm going to tackle insidious woke culture, which has begun to infect our public institutions. I will be Britain's first anti-woke Prime Minister. It's not acceptable for the NHS to refer to women as birthing humans, cis females or chest feeders. I'll make sure that the public sector embraces the fundamental facts of human biology. And whilst people are, of course, free to identify as they wish and be respected for that, there's no place for biological men in female spaces or female sport. I will restore what it is to be a woman and protect it in law. And let me put this on record. 0 women have penises, not even the butch ones. It's not acceptable for civil servants to be brainwashed into ideas like critical race theory, which divides our communities and goes against the wise words of Martin Luther King, who aspired to a colourblind society. So I'm going to fight the war on woke, and I'm going to win. The immediate challenge for the economy is to get inflation down to 3%, which is like a tax cut for everyone. Once that's been achieved, taxes will come down across the board, but not before. It should be you who decides how your money is spent, not the state. So how will I achieve these tax cuts? 2 things. A government focused exclusively and aggressively on growth. Plus, I will drastically cut public spending. Britain lives beyond its means, and we spend more than comes in. On my watch, that will end. It'll be hard. You can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, and I'm going to make the world's biggest omelette. With 5 million people of working age not active in the economy, unless you're physically unable to, you will get back to work. Getting up in the morning, getting out of the house and putting a shift in has got to pay more than sitting at home receiving handouts at the taxpayer's expense. Everything's got to shrink. And I don't just mean my rather short trousers. The NHS is too bloated, too big, too inefficient, and employs too many diversity officers and not enough oncologists and nurses. We're going to build more houses on brown and greenfield sites, with a blitz on red tape, planning laws, developers sitting on land, and NIMBYism. I will build our great cities of the future. But building more houses is pointless if demand continues at current levels, with legal net migration at over 600,000 a year and illegal immigration running into tens of thousands too. We've got to invest in our own people so we're not reliant on cheap foreign labour, which means aiming for net migration annually at 200,000 max and eliminating illegal crossings in the Channel entirely. These crossings are an economic, national security and humanitarian disaster, and I'm willing to exit the ECHR and do whatever else it takes to end this daily nightmare, which hurts the many people, the thousands of people, who do have a valid claim for asylum in this country. And I'm replacing net zero with what I'm calling smart net zero or smart zero, which means a long-term plan to reduce emissions, but one with 3 new red lines. Number 1, evidence-based science, so that we can have tangible proof that renewables and electric cars and windmills and all the rest of it are actually going to make a difference. Number 2, we will have the economy at the forefront, so we don't bankrupt ourselves or clobber hard-working Brits with crippling extra costs. And number 3, the will of the people, so that each and every one of you are aware of the costs, aware of the sacrifices needed, and support the plan. Smart Zero backs green renewables, but grants new oil and gas licences in the North Sea too, because the resources are there. Why buy them from Russia, Saudi Arabia and the United States? Smart Zero reverses the ban on petrol and diesel cars, and perfectly good boilers too, but not until 2030 or 2035, indefinitely. That's right, until the technology is affordable and catches up. And lastly, I will tackle crime, which is the new epidemic. Shoplifting, knife crime, burglaries, assault, it's getting out of hand. And I will create a culture in which people are afraid to break the law and afraid they will be caught. I will let police police again. But I'll make sure it's not a crime to be patriotic, to celebrate our complicated but glorious history, and to love this country. What binds our diverse society is that we are all British. So I want us to be one country again. It's time for all of us to come together, to work together, and build a bright future for the United Kingdom. Let's put the great back into Great Britain. Your reaction to my conference speech, there you go. It's like Rishi Sunak was saying those words. Let's hope he was listening. mark@gbnews.com is the email. I'll get pundit reaction shortly, but let's cross live now to Tory party conference in Manchester and our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, I won't ask you to comment on my speech because I'm not the Prime Minister, but tell me about the atmosphere up there in Manchester. What is the mood?
Well, very mixed. There are some Conservatives here that still believe it's possible that they might win the next election. Rishi Sunak still believes that. They are now only 10% behind Labour in one recent poll. I use the word only advisedly, but there are many, many people here who already believe that they have lost the general election and are already basically setting out their stall to get Rishi Sunak's job in the future. Now, the big set-piece event today was the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt's speech. Not very exciting announcements. I think we're certainly going to have to wait till the spring for those long-awaited tax cuts, if they come. But conversation here really dominated by a couple of things. First of all, the almighty row of HS2, and secondly, Rishi Sunak seems to be haunted by the sort of ghosts of Prime Minister's past. Now, on HS2, the government's official line is that no decision has been taken, but I was told this afternoon by an impeccable source that Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, has said that it is going to be axed and expects the announcement to be made in Rishi Sunak's speech on Wednesday.
Right.
Also, Liz Truss has been causing a lot of media attention, calling for tax cuts, for growth, all the things she normally talks about. I think Rishi Sunak probably doesn't appreciate the interventions, but she's very much still present at Conservative conference.
Well, listen, Catherine, I'll let you get back to conference and hopefully Michael Gove on the dance floor. My thanks to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Let's get reaction now to my conference speech. There you go. I wrote Rishi Sunak's keynote so he doesn't have to. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, former Labour Party advisor, and I should add speechwriter Matthew Larser, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda Delucy. Belinda, I think that's what Rishi Sunak should say on Wednesday. What's your view?
I think if it came from any other party other than the Tories or, God forbid, Labour or anything like that, people might believe it. The problem is we've heard tough rhetoric before from the Conservative Party. So if Rishi did make that speech, it's all about, do people trust he would deliver on it? And that's the issue at the moment with the Conservative Party. Rishi needs to put his big boy pants on and show to the country he has a purpose and what he stands for. Because at the moment, no one's quite sure what he stands for. And I was at the gala dinner last night in Manchester at the CDO gala with Priti Patel, and it is clear that the sort of actual Conservatives in the Conservative Party at the moment are seen as the rebels.
Yeah.
And Rishi needs to distance himself from the left wing of his party.
And he has started that, hasn't he, with his rethink on net zero?
He has, rethink on net zero, and interestingly, recently coming out and saying he will ignore the future rulings of the ECHR if they go against Rwanda. And I thought that was quite interesting as well. Again, let's hope it all plays out, but until he does make that break from the left wing of the party, the sort of Lib Dems who are masquerading as Conservatives in the party, then I think he's handing the keys to Labour. One thing about your speech I would like to just comment on. You talked about crime. One of the big triggers of all this mass crime, what you see a lot of the youth doing, is social media and how social media plays a part. And what I think the country would really benefit from is the government to look at social media and how it plays a part in youth crime and to cut down on that, you know, provide solutions to the problem.
Well, definitely, and social media is a disaster also for mental health, isn't it? Not just for young people, but probably most of us. Carol Malone, my big focus in that speech is the economy. That's number one. The cost of living crisis. Our viewers and listeners are struggling at the moment. Plus, we're looking at, other key structural issues within, whether it's energy security. There wasn't time for roads and transport and the rest of it. But the culture wars. Britain's first anti-woke Prime Minister, I think he could go far with that message.
All I can say is thank God you're not Prime Minister.
How dare you?
That's the thing that's uppermost in people's minds. Well, I think it's very important.
People are angered by the idea of women with penises.
I don't think it's an election-winning policy necessarily. I think, yes, of course we have to tackle it. Of course we do. But we tackle that on a daily basis anyway. But I think, for me, for the first time in quite a long time, I'm looking at Rishi now and I'm seeing a path to victory. Fraser Nelson used those words in a piece in the Spectator today. I'm looking at him and I'm seeing a bloke who's trying to shake off the car salesman image. He's trying to get tough. He's looking tougher. He's sounding tougher. Last week he said a lot of things I think would appeal to people about, he's going to fight this war on motorists. He's slowing down the rush to net zero. He is going to announce the cancellation of GCT, or at least they're going to, they're just going to do the London to Birmingham route. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people. I mean, we're going to discuss this later. We're going to say, is this a betrayal of the North? I think it's the total opposite of that. I think he's looked at a £100 billion bill and thought, nah, we're not going to do it, because that was really upsetting people. But I think he's saying a lot of the right stuff now, And but what I think he really needs to do is start hammering home the message to people about Starmer and the things that will happen if Starmer gets into power, like open borders, like wanting to go back into the EU, like, he's talking about, we know that he wants to open the borders. We know he wants for us now to take migrants from Europe more than we're taking our fair share.
He wants to give children the vote.
He wants to give children the vote. So basically, yes, I think he has to start hammering Labour.
Well, Matthew, energy security, tackling sort of the woke capture of our public institutions, and, of course, capping legal migration at 200,000 a year. Those are all in my speech. I think if Keir Starmer said half of those things, he'd win the next election.
Well, he will say half of those things because he'll talk about energy security, which is a major Labour theme. He talks about energy security last year.
By investing in windmills.
Well, not just by investing in windmills, but can I just say, I'm glad you're not Prime Minister, but I thought you did a really good job. I thought you did a reasonable job.
As an expert
as a speechwriter, I'm very glad that neither of you are leader of the opposition, though, because I think, or leader of the Tory party, because I think that my lot would have a much harder time than otherwise. You're also a lot taller than Rishi, which does make delivering a speech easier. You have a very good presence. Look, as somebody who writes speeches when I'm not chatting to you on GB News, the thing you need in a speech is a narrative. That sort of slightly pompous word for a story. And the problem they've got is, Carol's right. There's been a lot of energy over the last few days from Rishi, but it doesn't add up to a story, because unlike Rishi, you were starting with a blank sheet of paper. Prime Minister Dolan was starting from zero. He wasn't starting with a record of 13 years of failure. And, of course, HS2, for example, they spent all the money under their watch. So that he's kind of fighting himself, as it were, and fighting their own record.
Well, remember, Rishi was always opposed to HS2.
Yes,
anyway.
but it's same party.
Chancellor.
OK, listen, fascinating stuff. Your reaction, Mark at gbnews.com. Would you vote for me? Well, not literally, but what do you think about my big opinion? What do you think about some of the points that I've made and some of the tangible policies that I think that Sunak should roll out, including petrol and diesel cars and perfectly functional boilers for the foreseeable future? Still to come, after being cancelled by students, top professor Eric Kaufman has launched a university course to combat extreme political correctness, or woke ideology as it's known. He tells us more live in the studio shortly, but next in The Clash, as Jeremy Hunt declares war on the work-shy, has Britain become the lazy man of Europe once again? We'll debate that with Neil Hamilton. He's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, I have given my national address. Yes, indeed. Rishi Sunak will speak to conference on Wednesday. I've written the speech already. It was my big opinion monologue. It'll be on Twitter shortly. But a big response on email, mark@gbnews.com. Steve says, Mark, I would vote for all of that you said. Why can't politicians see the light? Many thanks for sharing your words. I feel I am not alone. OK, well, look, lots more of your emails to come. And also Richard Tice joining us. Should the right come together to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? But first, this. Yes, it's time for The Clash, and speaking at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester today, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has declared war on work-shy Brits by announcing a crackdown on those claiming benefits but refusing to look for a job. Here's what he had to say.
Even when companies are struggling to find workers, around 100,000 people are leaving the labour market every year for a life on benefits. Mel Stride gets this 100%, which is why he's replacing the work capability assessment. And we're going to look at the way the sanctions regime works. It isn't fair that someone who refuses to look seriously for a job gets the same as someone trying their best.
Hunt's intervention comes after the latest figures revealed that Brits took an average of 7.8 days off sick over the last year. That's right, almost 8 days of sick days in the past year, the highest level in more than a decade. And with over a fifth of the working age population now out of a job, is Britain becoming the lazy man of Europe all over again? Let me know your thoughts, mark@gbnews.com or at gbnews on Twitter. The poll results with you shortly, but to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome UKIP leader Neil Hamilton and the writer and broadcaster Anna May Mangan. Anna, great to have you back on the show. Do you think Britain is becoming the lazy man of Europe again?
No, I think Jeremy Hunt is operating some very lazy dog whistle politics here.
I mean, he should be concentrating. What he's trying to do is get the electorate to look the other way from the absolute bonfire that they've created in the British economy. There are £16 million in unclaimed benefits, and there's 300 billion in tax that's been avoided by the rich. And my favourite part of his very disingenuous speech is when he said he's going to offer therapy and medical support to get the sick and disabled back into work as well. I mean, does he not know what state the NHS is in? He probably doesn't, because he doesn't have to use it.
Well, indeed, actually, as per my manifesto just a few minutes ago, I think that if you're unable to go to work because of your health, then you should not. But there are plenty of people, Anna May Mangan, who can work, who don't, let's be honest.
Well, who's going to decide who they are? I don't know. I mean, I haven't tried to claim benefits recently, but lots of people I know have. And it is not an easy process. And there are already sanctions in place for those who won't look for work, who aren't doing their best to get off benefits. So this is just a story. This is Jackanory from Hunt, who wants their electorate to think that they're doing all they can. We've heard this before on the NHS, on the police, on crime. I mean, there's so many things, so many empty promises that he's made. This is just one more load of nonsense, really.
Well, Neil Hamilton, I don't think it's Jackanory. I don't think it's a tall tale. The figures speak for themselves. 8 sick days a year on average. The economy just can't afford that.
Well, let's look at the other big figures here. Since the start of the COVID pandemic, our working population has diminished by 860,000. And those who are economically inactive in the population have increased by 650,000. And in 2022 alone, the number of vacancies that were waiting to be filled went up by 500,000. So the number of jobs available has been going up, whereas the number of people who want to fill them has been dramatically falling. So, what we just heard is the real nonsense here. What Jeremy Hunt is saying is, of course, perfectly sensible. Well, he's talking about 100,000 a year. This is peanuts compared with not just the number of people who are economically inactive, but those who are doing unproductive jobs. Or what about those who are shirking from home? Half the civil service is working from home. In some departments, 71% of those who are employed by us, the taxpayer, are working from home. And I don't know whether others know all the temptations of working from home, but it's a dramatic reduction in productivity, which probably has occurred as a result of all that.
Neil, I think you're an outrageous hypocrite. Look at you, you're shirking from home. Christine's probably just poured you a large sherry. Anna May...
The difference is that we are self-employed, and so if we don't work, we don't earn. And I'm very pleased that I'm working at this very moment.
Fair play to you.
9:30 at night.
Fair play to you. Anna May Mangan, I will have viewers and listeners to this show who will say that either they know someone or they themselves haven't had a day off work for 50 years. But now, 8 days a year on average, businesses can't afford that. It's going to cripple them.
Do you know that 1 in 2 people in this country get cancer now? And there's a lot of unseen disabilities, a lot of mental health illnesses. So you can't judge people. The majority of people go to work, do a good job, but they are very angry at the state of the economy, their bills, their interest rates, their fuel, their petrol. In fact, talking of cars and petrol, this reminds me of the Norman Tebbit get on your bike moment that switched off so many of the electorate who actually couldn't find work because of their own, not because of their own laziness, but because of the other difficulties. So, this is just Tory rhetoric being regurgitated again. Jeremy Hunt should focus on his job, a job, by the way, he was put into by an unelected Prime Minister.
Neil Hamilton, closing remarks. Give me 10 seconds if you can.
Well, we have an economy which could be much greater than it is. The government has done nothing to take advantage of the freedoms which Brexit brought. We've done very little to get rid of the huge burden of unnecessary regulation. We need to give more people incentives to go out and to work harder through reducing taxation. We've had 13 years of Conservative government that's been behaving like Keir Starmer's government would work. So in the last few days, we've actually heard some inklings of real Conservative policies, such as dumping this net zero target although it's only for 5 years, and in other ways, which we could vastly increase the productive potential of the economy. We want a high-wage economy. That only comes from having high productivity.
That was a long 10 seconds, let me tell you. Christine's a lucky lady. Anna May Mangan, you raise a very good point. If we're going to encourage people to work, make sure they've got a job to go to. Fair point. My thanks to Anna May Mangan and the brilliant Neil Hamilton. What a great debate. Your reaction? Well, it's in. Let me say that Alan on Twitter has said the UK has record employment rates. I don't see how we can be considered lazy, especially compared to a lot of southern European countries with high unemployment. Sean on Twitter says Brits have become lazier by working from home and this should be scrapped so that people don't have a choice but to get back into the office and back into work. Dave said it's easy to put all the blame on job seekers, the majority of whom do keep applying for jobs but get rejected constantly. Try asking tougher questions of employers who won't take people on unless they'll work for peanuts. So, is Britain becoming, once again, the lazy man of Europe? The results are in. 78%, I'm afraid, say yes. Britain is becoming the lazy man of Europe, and 22% say no. Coming up, as Nigel Farage appears at the Tory party conference to a rapturous reception, is it time for the right to come together to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? I'll be asking the leader of Reform UK, very much a potential kingmaker at the next election, Richard Tice. But first, after being forced out of a prestigious academic institution, cancelled university professor Eric Kaufmann has set up a faculty for common sense. So should our young people be taught about the dangers that woke ideology poses to society? That's right, he's a top professor at a brand new anti-woke university. Would you send your kids there? He's live in the studio to deliver a knockout lecture next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Should the right come together to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? GB News star Richard Tice responding to that in just a few minutes. But let's now speak to Professor Eric Kaufmann, who was formerly the head of politics at Birkbeck University of London, when he was more or less cancelled by students over his more conservative-leaning views. After being ousted from a job he held for 20 years, the prof is now launching a war on woke by founding a faculty of common sense at a rival institution. He hopes it will become a globally recognised centre for research into the culture wars, examining woke attitudes to controversial subjects such as trans rights and critical race theory. And the prof joins me now. Professor, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Would you give us the circumstances by which or under which you left Birkbeck?
Yes. So I should say, Birkbeck didn't oust me. I mean, this was a situation where a number of things came together. One was a certain amount of cancel culture. So I'd had a few Twitter mobbings, again, by a small number of radical students, some radical staff. I'd had a certain number of internal investigations prompted by complaints by radicals.
So life at work was becoming uncomfortable?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it was just an awkward situation, and there'd been a story that someone had left the university, a radical person in our university had left. That created a bit of a storm. People called in. It was a bit awkward. So it just made relationships awkward. The quality of workplace life kind of deteriorated a little bit. But that on its own wouldn't have been enough, really, to push me out. It wasn't intolerable. It's just that, it's just suboptimal. And then an opportunity, I was aware of the University of Buckingham wanting to be a free speech university. And I kind of kicked it around for a number of years. Birkbeck then went into sort of financial difficulties with a redundancy program. I thought, now, if I'm ever going to do this, it's now. And then eventually I kind of signed with Buckingham. And what I'm doing there is kind of an off-piste university to say, well, let's do some things that are difficult to do in a regular university. Let us have a 15-week course on wokeness online, which is now a public online course, which I'm launching in January. Let's set up a center for heterodox social science. So we're going to look at questions that are neglected or where you're only allowed one point of view, right? So if we consider something like a race or gender gap, it could be caused by structural discrimination, but equally that might not be the reason. And we have to be allowed to investigate the other reasons that, in fact, may be the majority of the explanation. That's an example of where there is only one allowance.
It won't make skin colour, for example, the key metric necessarily, but actually an overview of all of the data and all the information you can gather.
Yeah, let's have a clash of ideas and open. That's what's supposed to happen. Viewpoint diversity, the best ideas win out over time through testing, measurement. All ideas are on the table, and you just go by what the data says. And that's not what's happening in a lot of these hot-button issues.
So let's drill into some of the specific aspects of woke ideology, because I think overall it's cancel culture, it's a lack of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is a huge problem. These are the tools which are deployed. But within that, you've got things like critical race theory. Now, this is the diametric opposite of Martin Luther King, judge me by the content of my character, not the colour of my skin. So what is critical race theory, and why is that, as an example, something that needs to be looked at? Because it's being taught as fact in schools and unis, isn't it?
Yeah, there is a sort of assumption that whenever there's a race disparity, it might be in grades, the number of people getting A stars, it might be the number of people being admitted. Whenever there is a race disparity, that is evidence of some kind of discrimination, right? And, of course, we don't say that about Gypsy and Irish travellers versus Jews. If there is an achievement gap there, we don't immediately jump to...
Or poor white kids who have the worst outcomes in terms of going to university.
Right. So on
So it's
some
about skin colour when it suits the narrative, and other times when it's not.
Right. So we're not going to compare Nigerians and West Indians. So we'll only compare on certain categories, on certain dimensions that are politically salient. And the one that is politically salient, of course, is race, a black-white gap, for example. Now, the critical race theorists would always argue whenever there's a gap, that's evidence of some kind of matrix of structural discrimination. We can't quite touch it. We can't quite measure it. When you can't measure something and touch it, that's called an ideology. It's called unfalsifiable. It's not scientific. So one of the big arguments is that this is really not a serious, it's pseudoscience. And yet it's sort of insinuated itself as the kind of ideology.
And you're a bad person if you don't adopt it. So
if you question it, yeah.
University of Buckingham is, and of course, I'm sure there are elements of wisdom within it.
Let's test it out. Let's measure it.
Expose it. So, look, the University of Buckingham, and how many undergraduates are there at that university?
Yeah, it's not a large university. It's only got about 3,000, just over 3,000 undergraduates. It's one of the few private universities in the UK. But it has, it scored top in the National Student Survey this year for freedom of expression. That's an indication that it is a freer place at the student level.
And I think you're doing an important job for society, because we certainly don't want kids to go to uni and be brainwashed into ideas. And it sounds like your course is about opening their minds, not telling them what to think.
Exactly. We're going to analyse this objectively, and there's going to be all views on the table, but we're not going to block off certain lines of inquiry.
Does it worry you that young people have become so illiberal and so close-minded and actually so authoritarian in some cases with cancel culture?
It really does, and this is shown in survey after survey. I mean, for example, roughly half of the under 18 to 25s in this country say J.K. Rowling should be dropped by her publishers. Half say no, they're split, whereas amongst the over 50s, it's like only 3 or 4% say she should be dropped. That's just one indication. There are a number of other questions. So by a 2-to-1 margin, they think protecting people from hostile speech, protecting marginalized groups from hostile speech is more important than protecting free speech. Again, that's come out in a number of recent surveys. So we have a generation that sort of goes to safety first more than freedom of speech.
And what's misunderstood is that there are many on the left who detest wokeism. And I've had ex-Labour MPs in the studio who are concerned about levels of migration into the country because of the impact on communities and all the rest of it, who have unwoke views but who are left-wing. So this wokeism is a very unique subset, isn't it?
Yeah, there's two real factors. One is age. So old leftists are a lot more tolerant than young leftists, twice as tolerant. So older leftists are more pro-free speech. And then you have a sort of old economic Marxist left, which is generally, in some cases, very anti the identity left. But that's fading. And more, if you go towards younger people, they're mostly on board the cultural left.
The woke mind virus, a term coined by Elon Musk. Will woke be defeated? Is it here to stay?
We're only at the beginning, and it's going to grow. I think, we've had a wave of energy that peaked around 2020, 21. We've got very good data on cancellations and such, but it's still at a much more elevated level than prior to the 2010s. And because the younger generations are more woke, as they become the median voter, we should expect this thing to be bigger and not smaller. So there's a lot to play for.
If there are people watching or listening that would like to participate in this course, how would they go about doing that?
So if you just go to my Twitter handle, which is at EPKAUFM, EPKAUFM, you go to the pinned tweet, you can check out the course. If you're interested, you can express interest. And we're starting in January, so hopefully some will want to join.
Brilliant. And I guess if they Google Eric Kaufman on Twitter, it'll come up as well?
Yeah, if they Google me on Twitter, it'll come up. I've also got a website, sneps.net, SNEPS.net.
So that's easy to remember, sneps.net.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Good luck with the course.
Thanks very much, Mark.
More power to you. Now, Thanks. Birkbeck University spokesman has said Birkbeck is committed to free, robust and open debate among all members of the college community. It has policies in place to enable free speech and procedures to investigate and act on concerns should it be notified of these. Professor Kaufman left Birkbeck at his own request as part of a restructure supporting the reorganisation of our academic departments. Professor Eric Kaufman, thank you so much. Coming up, the government are expected to confirm the axing of the second leg of HS2 from Birmingham. Is this a betrayal of the North? My panel return to debate that shortly. But next, as Nigel Farage appears at Tory party conference to a rapturous reception, should the right come together to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? I'll be asking Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK. He's next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Time now for the leader of Reform UK, and I'm delighted to say GB News star Richard Tice. And the Tory conference officially kicked off yesterday with a surprise guest attending the Conservative Democratic Organisation's plush dinner with MPs and deep-pocketed donors. Our own Ben Leo went to have a nose around the CDO gathering, which aims to restore democracy to the party in the wake of Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister, despite being rejected by members.
Hello. Hello. How are you?
How are you?
Are you well?
Well indeed, Ben.
You're here at a Tory event tonight.
I know.
It's the first for you.
I know.
Are you lurching back into the Tory fold?
The last Tory event I went to would be... You weren't born. 1987, probably. Well, I was invited by somebody who thought, wouldn't it be great mischief if I turned up? And I'm quite looking forward to seeing some of the faces. I suspect the majority of people at this dinner will agree with a lot of what I say.
Nigel Farage is here tonight. What's that a sign of?
I think this is a sign of the fact that we want to stop Labour. We have to work together. There are a lot of people here that I think have been quite disillusioned in the past, but we have to just move forward. And the prospect of a Labour government is something that will unite everyone.
I did like Nigel's bow tie. There's only one person that looks better in a bow tie. It is Richard Tice. Richard, great to see you. Do you think there is a way that the right can come together to keep Starmer out of number 10 that doesn't dilute the Reform UK vote?
Well, the reality is, Mark, that the Tories have become con-socialists. They're the same coin, the same socialist coin as Keir Starmer. High tax, high regulation, low growth. If they want to come and join us in a proper low tax, smartly regulated, high-growth agenda, fine, but they are a country mile from that. That is absolutely clear. Nigel was enjoying the mischief that he was creating there. It was interesting, Mark, to hear Priti Patel, I believe in a number of occasions, she kept referring to the need for reform. Well, I agree, there is a need for reform. Frankly, we need to be absolutely in the centre position making the arguments. The reality is, Mark, that the Tories they've been nibbling at some of our policies. They've been nibbling at our very sensible policy to scrap net zero. They've been nibbling at our very sensible policy to scrap the whole of HS2. And we've been pro-abolishing the whole of inheritance tax for years. So all of these things is because actually they're worried about progress we're making, the common sense that we talk, but they just can't quite get themselves there.
Is there any kind of arrangement that can happen with the Conservatives and potentially UKIP?
No.
And does that not guarantee Keir Starmer in number 10 in a year's time?
No, not at all. Actually, what I say to people is, listen, vote for what you believe in, not what you're afraid of. Democracy is better when people have got more choices, more debate. That's how we make progress. But all of this, Mark, is about getting towards what we must have in this country, which is fair votes, equal votes. We must get proportional representation. And here's the irony, Mark. If the Tories actually wanted to avoid losing the next election, the best thing they could do before this forthcoming election is to go for proportional representation. Then we'd be into a very different ballgame. Look, PR is the right way forward. First past the post. It's tainted, it's unfair, and we've got to move towards proportional representation. Then we can have a real seat at the table.
Richard, if you talk about PR, first of all, that's hung parliaments forever, and we don't have a great track record of hung parliaments in this country. Also, don't you more or less have sort of centre-left administrations forever, given the fact that you'd have the SNP votes, Lib Dem and Labour? The right would never get in, and that's what this conversation is about. It's about the right.
Mark, you need to just look to Wales, where under a devolved system with proportional representation, Labour have held power. Look to Scotland, where under proportional representation, the SNP have held power. Look to Italy, where Giorgia Meloni went from 4% to 27% and being Prime Minister. Competition's good, Mark. You believe in competition. So do I. We need disruptors, new people able to get into politics, creating good ideas with proper, sensible, common sense politics. That's what we stand for at Reform, Mark.
However, if you perform strongly at the next election, which will impact the Conservatives more disproportionately because you're on the right side of the spectrum, will you feel guilty if Labour are in charge for 5 years? Will it keep you awake at night, knowing that you had a hand in that?
Look, Mark, as I say, I think that we need to move towards proportional representation. Whatever will be, but I'm not doing any deals. We did that last time with the Conservative Party. We gave them a chance. Frankly, they wasted it, they blew it, they've had their chance. Arguably, it's the Tories who, having messed it up, they should be standing aside. Let me take on Keir Starmer, and I'll absolutely knock him for 6, Mark.
I predict a hung parliament at the next election, Richard. I think that shares in Sunak are too low, shares in Starmer are too high. I wonder whether proportional representation might come sooner than many expect.
Oh, I've been saying to people, anybody who'll listen, I think we'll have it within 3 years of now. That would be fantastic. And if it requires a referendum, fine. We're quite good at referendums, actually. We've got a track record of winning them, Mark. So I'm delighted to lead that as well. Absolutely. You never know, Nigel might want to get involved. Who knows?
Listen, before we go, can I congratulate you on joining the GB News family? I'm genuinely delighted that you're here. I think you're an honest man, very authentic man, a great guy as well. Are you enjoying your first few days at GB News?
Absolutely. I've had a very exciting time. I was delighted to be able to host Nigel's show in his absence last week. And we talked about some really, really big, important issues. So, yeah, really looking forward to carrying on with a great team.
Well, try not to get suspended and you'll have a great time, let me tell you. Richard, why did you join GB News?
Because, Mark, I'll tell you why. Because actually, I'm up in Sunderland tonight. And wherever I've been going, more and more people, they say to me, I've seen you on TV, I've seen you on GB News. This evening, 5 people came up to me, leaving from the train station to the hotel, said, hi, it's you. I see you on GB News. Keep up the good stuff. That's a real thing. I tell you, Mark, the exponential growth of GB News is a joy to behold for everybody involved. It's going from strength to strength.
A brilliant new star on the channel. Richard, welcome to the family. Fascinating stuff. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. Coming up, has Labour celebrated their election victory too soon? We'll get the views of iconic polling guru Sir John Curtis. What he doesn't know about the polls, you don't need to know. Bona fide icon. He's crunched the numbers as well. He will predict the outcome of the next election. But next, in a developing story, the government are expected to confirm the axing of the second leg of HS2 from Birmingham. Is this a decision that is a betrayal of the North?
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bright and breezy sums up tomorrow. A bit of a grey start in the south, and there will be some showers, particularly across the north and the west. Overnight, some pretty heavy rain moving in. A very soggy one out there right now, thanks to this area of low pressure. Some intense downpours, even the odd rumble of thunder likely over the Midlands and eastern parts of England over the next few hours. Could be very wet indeed for a time across parts of Norfolk especially. But that all tends to scoot away through the early hours. Many places will become dry, certainly across Scotland and Northern Ireland, some clear spells. A little chilly here, down to single figures, but staying quite mild across the south. Temperatures may stay in the teens in the capital, but quite a grey start to Tuesday. Still some outbreaks of rain over the East Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, potentially still around for the rush hour. Gradually pulling away through the morning, then brighter skies, showers for western Scotland, parts of northern England, a few for Wales and Northern Ireland too, but much of the south and east having a largely dry afternoon. A fresher feel, temperatures mostly in the mid-teens at best, and similarly on Wednesday. The wind's a little lighter on Wednesday. Much of central and eastern England looking dry and bright, but more wet weather coming into northern Scotland and then further south along the west coast. That rain could be quite heavy and could cause a little disruption coming into Northern Ireland later on too. Further south, most places dry and bright, just the odd shower. And again, temperatures mostly in the mid to high teens.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan looking after the shop for the next couple of nights. HS2 goes off the rails as the £100 billion project looks set to be torn up by Rishi Sunak. Talk swirling around the Conservative Party conference today suggests that HS2's London to Manchester leg will be axed by the PM. But is this a decision that is a betrayal of the North? That is the big debate with my panel. We'll debate that shortly in the company of Carol Malone, Matthew Lazar and Belinda Lidlucy. Also tonight, is Rupert Murdoch's media empire about to dramatically switch allegiance to Labour? And could that decide the next election? I'll be asking Fleet Street icon Kelvin MacKenzie in Uncancelled later. Elsewhere, with momentum behind Rishi Sunak and with the Tories closing in on the polls, have Labour been celebrating victory too soon? We'll get the views of legendary polling guru Sir John Curtis. Meanwhile, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, blasts critics such as Sir Elton John and Gary Lineker as out-of-touch pampered elites, as it's revealed that 25,000 migrants have crossed the channel this year. So should celebrities stay out of politics and issues that only affect everyday Brits? My panel return on that shortly. Also find out why Father Ted creator turned activist Graham Linehan is being lined up for a gong when I crown tonight's greatest Briton and Union jackass. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages are minutes away too, so lots to get through. But first, the news and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. Well, the top story tonight on GB News is that the Greater Manchester Mayor says axing the northern leg of HS2 would be the desperate act of a dying government. That, as Number 10s has told GB News tonight, that no decision has been taken yet on the line. Andy Burnham, though, called on the Prime Minister to end the shambles on HS2 following increased speculation about the rail project's future, and a number of government ministers calling for the project to be reviewed. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, said it shouldn't cost 10 times more to build a railway in the UK than just across the Channel in France. Well, the Chancellor also today announced plans to freeze the expansion of the civil service and reduce its numbers to pre-pandemic levels. During his speech at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester today, Jeremy Hunt said it would save the government £1 billion next year. Meanwhile, the Chancellor announced tougher benefit sanctions on those who are capable of working but choose not to. And he announced a national living wage rise to £11 an hour.
We promised in our manifesto to raise the national living wage to 2/3 of median income, ending low pay in this country. At the moment, it's £10.42 an hour, and we're waiting for the Low Pay Commission to tell us next year's recommendation. But I confirm today, whatever that recommendation, we'll increase the national living wage to at least £11 an hour next year. That's a pay rise for 2 million workers.
Well, the former Prime Minister has called on the Chancellor to cut corporation tax from 25% back to 19% in his next autumn statement. Speaking at a Fringe rally earlier on today, the former Prime Minister urged the Tory leadership to axe that tax, cut bills and build homes. Their comments came after Jeremy Hunt told GB News no substantial tax cuts were possible this year. This trust, though, said businesses are choosing not to locate in the UK and they shouldn't be treated like a cash cow. Now, away from politics, a second police force is investigating allegations against the comedian Russell Brand. In a statement, Thames Valley Police said it had received new information relating to harassment and stalking allegations dating back to 2018. The police force added it would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation, which follows a joint investigation by the Sunday Times and Channel 4. Russell Brand denies all accusations of criminality. And if you haven't already felt it, thunderstorms are set to batter the country this evening. It comes as the Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for areas right across the UK. From Manchester and Birmingham right down to London and Southampton, there are currently 24 flood warnings in place as well, mainly in East Anglia. And the Met Office has warned of intense downpours, lightning and gusty winds. Downpours also expected for the rest of the week, with yellow storm warnings over parts of the UK until Friday. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages. And we start with, it's Mank robbery. Rishi Sunak was accused of pulling the plug on the North as claims the HS2 rail project from Birmingham to Manchester has been cancelled, overshadowing the Tory conference. Mayor Burnham's fury as HS2 to end at Birmingham. But Number 10 insists nothing is settled. Sunak accused of cancelling the future with climb down over HS2. And Trump gained $1 billion from fraud, a court hears. OK, what was that, young Matthew? OK, brilliant stuff. OK, folks, now let's get reaction from my wonderful pundits. I'm delighted to welcome Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer, and ex-Brexit Party MEP Belinda Delucy. Now, the rumours have been swirling for some time, and Rishi Sunak appears to be set on scrapping the northern leg of HS2. The high-speed rail line has been racking up enormous costs of at least £71 billion, and according to reports, the PM will announce it won't run between Birmingham and Manchester. Unfortunate timing, given that this week Sunak is attending Tory party conference and making his speech on Wednesday in Manchester. Downing Street, however, have denied the reports, saying no final decisions have been taken. Matthew, has the North just been cancelled?
Absolutely. I think the Metro has got it. It is a Manc robbery. I'm a Mancunian, and, I mean, first of all, forget whether the policy's right or not. It's just look at the politics of it. Going to Manchester to tell them they're not going to get their railway line is like going to Portsmouth and telling the Navy it's about to lose half its ships. I mean, it's pretty bad politics. It's pretty bad optics. Look, we wouldn't start from here with HS2. If we were post-pandemic, people working from home, yes, patterns of travel have changed, so I can see why people get sceptical about it. And yes, we do need the east-west link across the north, but we've started it. We need to finish it. If we only do half of it, it's an international laughing stock.
Given that this HS2 project began under New Labour and Tony Blair, on behalf of Labour, would you now like to apologise to all of my viewers and listeners?
No, because in 2000, when it was talked about by Andrew Adonis, who was the last Labour Transport Secretary, it was actually given the green light by the Tories.
Actually, he's right. It was given the green light by Cameron and Osborne.
Yeah, but it was a Blair brainchild, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. It was
Blair's grand
projet.
Was
Cameron and Osborne, who in 2008, who said it would be a great idea. They wanted to have the prestige of having the fastest train line in Europe. And Osborne at the time said it was going to cost something like $15.5 billion and be finished by 2027. What a joke. So far, I think this is a bullet dodged by everyone, including the North. I mean, we've got to stop pretending that the North are going to be cut off from the world. No, they're not. And I think a lot of Northern people, like the rest of us, will be relieved that we're not going to have to bear the enormous cost of this. We're told now it would have been about $100 billion if it carried on. It would be more than that. It would be much more than that. But the bottom line, this was a vanity project by Cameron and Osborne. It was green-lighted by Boris as well. But Sunak he always said, the cost was ridiculous. And what do you think? Just let me read out this stat. I read this here. This is incredible. The current estimates of it was going to cost 200 million quid per kilometre to build this, whereas fast train lines in Europe were going to cost £25 million a kilometre to build. So what are we thinking of? The cost benefit of this was never properly looked at, and it's spiralling out of control before a single kilometre of track has been laid. They've dodged a financial bullet.
But Belinda, we've seen disastrous procurement from Whitehall in terms of the military. Gordon Brown with nuclear. It was the flight carriers.
The aircraft carriers.
Yeah, those sorts of things that would prove to be defunct by the time they were made. And also, politicians shouldn't be involved in infrastructure, should they?
Well, I loved the headline you read out. It was like, we've cancelled the North's future. The HS2 is going to be out of date by the time it gets built. All this money just for slightly faster trains. What people want are more frequent trains. They want trains that run on time. They want there to be less strikes. If you ask the everyday, Joe Bloggs on the street, they're not obsessing over HS2. They just want better train services, quicker ones, not ones that come more often. When I get the train, I don't drive, so I'm a train girl. And the amount of strikes and delays and waiting, that's what people care about. This is a total vanity Party project. It's throwing good money after bad. And it's also...
I can see where you're both coming from, but we need to finish it. Because
Why would you spend
what you're doing,
$100 billion
you want to throw good money after bad, which is classic Labour.
Not losses of $20 billion. We haven't laid a single piece of track yet.
We have built a lot of tunnels, though.
Not a single piece of track.
At the moment, but Carol, at the moment, the link to Birmingham is going to take longer than the existing train line, and it's going to dump you in Neasden on the fringes of London.
Before we waste another $100 billion quid,
But he's not going to do that. He's not saying he's going to pull the plug on the existing. He's going to finish half of it, which is basically pointless, rather than finishing the whole thing.
But of course, what he may do is put the money into other infrastructure projects.
Wait and see.
In the north.
You can't believe anything he says.
Well, he wants to get re-elected in the north of England.
£10 billion quid into projects in the north, which is a
you're pushing for HS2, demonstrating that Labour have a problem with wasting money.
Yes,
absolutely.
And there you are on record throwing good money after bad. After we know what the debacle.
If we'd had a Labour government, we wouldn't have spent $100 billion on it.
In the casino, putting more money on black.
Not at all, Mark. Because if we'd had a Labour government, we wouldn't be here. We'd have had the project would be finished by now. Just as the socialists built the TGV in France. Mitterrand built the TGV.
Tony Blair's ID scheme.
No, we need a cut
or turning the NHS digital. How did that go?
It started turning the NHS digital. It's under the Tories. They're still...
Let alone lay a railway.
I'm glad it's after 10 o'clock. I'm glad it's after 10 o'clock. Because on the NHS digitalisation, the NHS is still using fax machines. I'll remind you, Mark, we've had 13 years of a Tory government, OK? 13 years when they could deliver it. It's cancelling their own money that they've wasted. It's, you can't blame everything on Labour. It's something like this SNP blaming everything on the English.
Better cancel it having wasted $20 billion than cancel it having wasted $150 billion in its...
We are being laughed at internationally.
I wonder, Carol, whether you are patronising my viewers and listeners in the north who would like a fast...
That was Northern.
You know what? I think
she's not been Northern for years.
I think Northerners are very sensible
She's in
people.
Now.
No, she is not. I've been to Islington.
That's where you live.
I think Northerners are way more sensible than we give them credit for, and they will be thinking we've dodged a financial bullet here because they will have to bear the cost of this the way everyone else in the country. And
poor little North. We've got to save money for the North. This is an insult to my viewers in the North.
Can we make the point as well that all of our major... Can we make the point that all of our major cities are about 2.5 hours apart? We don't need to spend $150 billion quid to save 30
But it's a message, isn't it? And that's the problem for Sunak on Wednesday. The message is the North isn't worth it. It doesn't merit this infrastructure.
No, because I think they're going to come up with a delicious dish of goodies for the North, saying this is where we're going to redirect the money.
A few more buses.
And the whole thing's...
A couple of bus stops in Wigan.
With
Thanks for
NIMBYism.
nothing.
It's the typical not in my backyard that's delayed it and stopped. It's not going to work out. I think cut your losses and run.
How can you sit here, Belinda, how can you sit here in London saying the North don't need HS2?
I'm a Sheffield girl.
You're the only Southerner.
You're a Southerner.
And you live in Islington.
I am talking out for my... I will say that I'm split on HS2. I'm split on it, and I do, but I think it's unaffordable. But I would say that every penny saved must go to the North.
I
agree. We agree on that.
We all agree on that.
Yeah.
Let's hold. And if he says that, let's hold him to it.
Let's not make a habit of it. It's not what this show is about. This show is the home of diverse opinion. What do you think, though? Actually, I'm going to let you decide. Is it right to scrap HS2 from Birmingham? Is it a betrayal of the North? Mark at gbnews.com. Do email me. It comes straight to this as my laptop comes straight to it. Now, coming up, Suella Braverman blasts critics such as Elton John, he's still standing, and Gary Lineker. And she called them out-of-touch pampered elites as it's revealed that 25,000 migrants have crossed the channel this year. So, should rich celebrities stay out of politics and issues that only affect everyday Brits? My superstar panel debate that later. Let's be honest, they're celebrities too. What do they know? And next, with momentum behind Rishi Sunak and the Tories closing in on the polls, have Labour celebrated victory too soon? We'll get the views of legendary polling guru Sir John Curtis. He's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I've got to say the highlight of the show is always your emails, mark@gbnews.com, and you've got me chuckling away. Well, first, a serious one, and this is from Anne-Marie in Middlesbrough. How are you, Anne-Marie? Anne-Marie says, Mark, yes, cancelling HS2 is an insult to the North, and the Tory promise to level up. We have an appalling railway service compared to other European countries. Why can't we get our railway system right? And Sam has said, Mark, scrap the effing thing. Sam's not pulling his punches. And he says, that's coming from a northerner. We don't need trains up here. We just nick a car. Only joking, says Sammy. Listen, keep those emails coming. mark@gbnews.com. Kelvin McKenty later tonight. But first, Sir Keir Starmer's chances of getting into number 10 looked nailed on not too long ago. Bombshell new polling, however, revealed that Labour's lead over the Conservatives has narrowed to 10 points. It comes after Rishi Sunak took an axe to a series of net zero commitments amid concerns about costs for struggling households. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the legendary polling guru, Sir John Curtis. Sir John, a privilege to have you back on the show. Do you think that a Labour victory is still nailed on?
No, and it's never been nailed on. But let's distinguish between a couple of different things. We have to remember that, at least on the conventional ways of calculating these things, and we can then debate about how necessary it's going to be true, but the Labour Party might need as much as a 12 or 13-point lead over the Conservatives just to get a majority of one. So even with Labour's lead at 18 points, which is what it was before Mr Sunak's announcement, the difference between those two figures is not sufficiently great that you would say that a Labour overall majority was nailed on. That, however, is very different from saying, even with a 10-point Labour lead, which is the lowest in any of the polls so far, that would mean that the Conservatives would be winning election. They certainly wouldn't. We just would be potentially in hung parliament territory with Labour forming a minority administration. But if you want to make sense of this, it's been true. 1 and 2 polls have shown a noticeable decline in Labour's lead in the last few weeks. But the truth is we need to look at all of the evidence. So yes, opinion for the lead at 10. YouGov put it at 21. The average Labour lead over the Conservatives has slipped a bit. It's now down to 16 points because the Conservative vote is up a couple of points as compared with the position before the announcement on net zero, although we should remember that at the beginning of September, Conservative support did actually slip a point. And even at 16 points, the Labour lead over the Conservatives is still a point higher than it was before the Conservative Party failed to get in behind the Privileges Committee report that said that Mr Johnson had misled the House of Commons, the failure of which, the party to do that, saw Labour's lead widen quite noticeably. So, yes, it's been a relatively good week for the Conservatives in the polls, relative to where it's been, but the progress is still fairly small. And I think at the moment, it would be too early to come to the conclusion that it's been a fundamental change of the game, as opposed to the Prime Minister, I think, undoubtedly articulating some of the concerns that voters do have about net zero, which is how much it's going to cost them.
Indeed. Do you not think, though, Sir John, that the polls can be a little hard on the incumbent? I can't really remember a time in my lifetime when any particular government or Prime Minister was wildly popular. Perhaps straight after the election, Tony Blair in 1997. But once they're sort of, into their term of office, there aren't too many popular governments. Do you think that could change on polling day and the government get a bit of a bounce?
Well, let's go back, actually. It's worth remembering, although we now all forget, that actually this government was remarkably popular for 2 years. All the way through to December 2021, the government was never behind Labour in the polls, and for most of that was actually ahead. But of course, along came Partygate, and things started to change. This government was for a while remarkably popular. Now, I think there are two things that I think any Conservative could potentially hang on to. One is, historically, the polls do tend to be a little bit likely to overestimate Labour, though not by sufficient to make an 18 or a 16-point lead all of a sudden a Conservative victory. It's also true that people who voted Conservative in 2019 are more likely to say to the pollsters, I don't know what I'm going to do at the next election, and maybe they'll go back to Conservatives, but there's no guarantee of that. But I think the thing that above all the Conservatives have to worry about is that even with a 16-point lead, they've not really made that much progress in the last 12 months in narrowing the lead that Labour acquired in the wake of Liz Truss's fall and Mr Sunak becoming Prime Minister. And there are now only another 12 months before the next election. So the speed of recovery has got to be much, much greater in the next 12 months. But can we rule it out? Of course we can't. But it's almost, I think, going to require the party not simply to hope that by, for example, focusing on stop the boats or indeed on net zero, that is going to be sufficient to get the Conservatives back in a position where they might win an election. They're in the end going to have to deal with the tough nuts facing this government. And the tough nuts facing this government is, one, the economy and the cost of living crisis, and the fact that many people in the electorate currently blame the government, rightly or wrongly, for the state of the economy. And the second is waiting lists in the NHS. And of course, we're now in the middle of yet another doctor's strike, which is not making trying to get the waiting list down looking any easier. And unless those two problems are solved, then I think the government will find it very difficult to win the next election.
Well, Sir John, I'll say it for you. The government should be held responsible for the state of the economy. And I'm sure, as you say, if inflation comes down to around 3% by October, then perhaps all bets are off. Final question, Sir John. How presidential are election campaigns these days in the UK? And if it's a more presidential campaign next year. Does that help either party?
Well, the answer to is that sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. But they'll only begin to become presidential if you have charismatic leaders. And the honest truth is, Mark, I would say that neither Rishi Sunak, nor Sir Keir Starmer, nor Sir Ed Davey, nor indeed Humza Yousaf in Scotland, that any of them are charismatic politicians. The two things they're relatively weak on is, one, commanding our attention, and two, being able to craft a broad synoptic message of what they stand for. Now, that's what Rishi Sunak is meant to be working on. But at the moment, we've seen bits and pieces, and some of the bits and pieces struggling with the media with this stuff about HS2 today. And unless one of those leaders begin to grasp the attention of the public and begin to be able to give a much clearer impression of what they're about, I don't think we're going to have a presidential election campaign.
OK, listen, always a thrill to have you on the show, the absolute guru, the mecca of political polling. Sir John, I'm just on the Paddy Power website at the moment. Other websites are available, William Hill, Please Gamble Responsibly, Ladbrokes. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. The date and result of the next election, please.
The date of the next general election, I think, will be the last Thursday in October before the clocks go back. As for the outcome, well, I think the Labour Party are overwhelming favourites to form the next administration, but whether it will be a majority administration or a minority administration, that is where the principal land of uncertainty lies. And one of the reasons I say that, Mark, is nothing to do with the potential outcome of the election. The truth is that unless the Conservatives have about 320 seats, they won't be able to get a King's Speech through the House of Commons because the Liberal Democrats and the SNP won't vote for a Conservative minority administration, and probably the DUP won't either.
Sir John, great to have you on the show. Look forward to catching up soon. My thanks to Sir John Curtis. By the way, I would never encourage anybody to gamble. I do not gamble because I'm already skint, and it would make things worse, and Mrs. Dolan would be furious with me. But I don't mind a sportsman's bet. Do you know what that is? That's where you just have a bet without money. So, look, there you go. What do you think? Do you agree with Sir John Curtis that the election will be in October and it will be a Labour victory in one form or another? Mark at gbnews.com. Your predictions for the next election. Coming up in Uncancelled, is Rupert Murdoch's media empire about to dramatically switch allegiance to Labour? And could that decide the next election? I'll be asking Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie, who's also got some strong views about the striking doctors. He's too hot to handle tonight. He's uncancelled shortly. But next in the media buzz, Suella Braverman blasts celebrity critics such as Elton John and Gary Lineker as out-of-touch, pampered elites, as it's revealed that 25,000 migrants have crossed the channel this year. So should celebs like Elton John and Lineker stay out of politics and issues that affect everyday Brits? My superstar panel will be debating that. I'll see you in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7pm.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11pm for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11pm every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Great to have your company, Mark Dolan, looking after the shop for the next couple of nights. I hope you are well. The email is mark@gbnews.com. Do get your thoughts to me. Let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight in our media buzz, and more front pages have been delivered. And young Matthew has given me the I newspaper. Tory rebellion grows as PM scraps HS2 in the north. Rishi Sunak faces growing Tory backlash as he prepares to axe the second phase of HS2, something we've been debating very shortly. Tory Mayor of West Midlands, Andy Street, has pledged, "I will not let HS2 go without a fight," while the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, warns a drastic move like this will lead to serious questions for the PM. OK, now let's look at the Mail newspaper. Britain is the best country to be black in, says Kemi Badenoch. We see people, not labels, says Minister in rousing speech on race, gender and Brexit. The Business Secretary used a tub-thumping speech to blast Labour over its woke views and for using Brexit to repeatedly talk down Britain. She lashed out over trans rights, Remainer defeatism and the pace of reaching green targets. Future Conservative Party leader, I wonder, Belinda?
What, Suella?
No, Kemi Badenoch.
Kemi? Well, yes, except I don't think she's necessarily got the hugest respect when she dismissed all the EU regulations that were supposed to be getting burnt, and she's sort of, you know, I love Kemi.
Not Brexity enough.
She's not Brexity enough.
It wasn't a bonfire,
I was like, it wasn't a yeah, the bonfire we were expecting was more like a whiffle of smoke, and I lost a little bit of respect for Kemi over that, but I love what she says. Suella is probably more...
Well,
my cup of tea.
I've got to say, I would bite your hand off for Kemi Badenoch to be the leader of this country, but maybe I'll have to wait a few years.
Be leader of the opposition, Mark, after the next election.
Well, that's probably right.
Don't kid
Probably
yourself.
right.
I might have said that a month
Meanwhile,
ago.
Rishi Sunak off to California.
Still got the green card, hasn't it?
Thank you very much.
Still got
Ka-ching, ka-ching. OK, Daily Express, I'm in big trouble with the team, and we've got a show to do here, folks.
We're enjoying ourselves too much.
Let me tell you, that's not what you're here for. The Daily Express, Rishi's path to victory by delivering what's best for Britain. Sounds like my little manifesto at the start of the show, doesn't it? Rishi Sunak is planning a series of bold announcements that will focus on what's best for Britain. He'll pitch himself to voters as the change candidate, willing to take tough decisions such as ditching the next stage of HS2. Also, briefly, sorry, folks, just to say, Hunt saves £1 billion axing woke civil service jobs. The Sun newspaper, poor old Shirley Ballas. She says that death threats from trolls have left her scared to leave her home. The Star reveals the increasingly violent and sexual messages have left her constantly on guard, and she can never relax for fear the trolls are lurking in dark corners or hiding behind walls. It's changed my life completely. Poor Shirley is a wonderful lady, and she really shouldn't be going through this. OK, those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from our fantastic panel. Daily Express columnist, the slimline Carol Malone.
If I'm not slim as you, love.
That. We also have the very svelte, let me tell you. I would speculate a 31 waist, probably 34 inside leg.
Too much speculation.
Sadly not. I wish. You're
40 chest. Matthew Larsa. And I can't offer any numbers. She's just perfect. It's former Brexit Party MEP Belinda Belusi.
I was breathing in there going, oh, what's he going to say?
You can only do it with boys now, yes.
Yeah, that's it.
You're on much safer ground.
I'm gonna watch my back. Let's not get cancelled. We're living in febrile times, are we not? OK, in yet another miserable landmark, the number of migrants crossing the Channel this year hit 25,000 today. But as the crisis intensifies, so does the virtue signalling from woke lovies who have taken issue with Suella Braverman saying that some migrants pretend to be gay in order to game the system. Just last week, Sir Elton John, whose homes include a £15 million villa on the French Riviera, called for, quote, more compassion, support and acceptance for those seeking a safer future. There's Elton looking very smart in his glasses. David Furnish wearing a carpet by the looks of it. Yeah. Meanwhile, the BBC's top-paid presenter Gary Lineker also couldn't resist a dig at Suella Braverman, declaring that she can't possibly know that refugees are lying, therefore she's being disingenuous at best. But in an interview with the Mail on Sunday, the Home Secretary Suella Braverman blasted the pair as being part of an out-of-touch, pampered elite. What do we think about that? Does she have a point, Belinda, or is she playing politics?
I think she put it really politely. I think that's the nicest way she could have put it. These celebs live in a bubble, an ivory tower bubble. They've gained their platform and fame because a huge variety of fans from all political backgrounds have gifted them their fame and their platform.
And paid 200 quid for the tickets.
And now they're turning around believing that platform gives them the right now to demonise half their fans. Because remember, Elton John was so nasty about Brexit and about Brexiteers, saying that he wasn't one of those colonial, imperialist, idiotic English people on the Brexit vote. You have people like Emma Thompson and Stephen Fry, and they're all doing down the country all the time because they live all around the world. They're internationalist chummeries. They have messiah complexes because their egos are so huge. They have no idea what it's like to wait for a doctor's appointment, to wait for a school place, to have a community filled with hotels with undocumented men. They never have to walk amongst ordinary people. So they have this arrogance of talking down the British public who have concerns when they're on a platform gifted to them by the people.
I would like now to stand up and applaud that, but I'd be out of shot. Can I just say that is very powerful, what you've just said. In mitigation for Elton, because I've got no defence of Gary, I've got to say, because I find that he's the king of double standards, but Sir Elton has spoken out about gay rights and applied to gay people for decades now. He's the chairman of the Elton John AIDS Foundation. So in terms of Elton, it comes from a particular place, which is his concern about the abuse of gay people.
Oh, come on. We know.
I think it's
there's a very powerful piece last week from an asylum lawyer called David Haig, who has said that not only are 80% of most asylum claims bogus, he also talked about how many claims he gets from men from various countries pretending that they're gay. They say, we're not gay, but we've heard that it gets you in, pretended to be gay, gets you into this country. Yeah. Now, this is an asylum lawyer who deals with this all of the time. So, let's not pretend that everyone trying to get into this country is a persecuted gay. There are 70 countries in the world where homosexuality is criminalised, and only a handful of those countries are gays actually persecuted and killed. We know around that's a handful. The rest, 29 of those countries, by the way, are Commonwealth countries. So gays are not persecuted in the way that they're saying they are in those countries. But, to me, these two are a joke. These are rich, privileged elitists. The two of them don't have the guts to stand for political office. Elton John, he does the AIDS stuff, he throws parties, he supports the AIDS Foundation. I get all of that. But these two don't have the guts to stand up in public and face people and have what they think challenged. Lineker sits there. I think Lineker is a dangerous man. Last year he talks about Suella inciting hatred. He was inciting hatred against her last year. He incensed all of Britain's Jews by throwing the word Nazism around in relation to Suella and this government. You know, not only, you know, that is inciting hatred. He was, you know, the Jewish people were up in arms about this because not only he degrades what happened to the 6 million Jews who were murdered, and he degrades what's happened to their families since by throwing this Nazism phrase around. I'd love to challenge Lineker in public and say to him, what do you think Nazism means?
Well,
perhaps
there is a counterbalance to this, which is that Gary Lineker is actually a guy of conscience. He's taken refugees in.
No, he's
his
taken
own home.
one.
He took a refugee in, and this guy is well reported to just be very, very concerned about the plight of people who are fleeing for their lives, fleeing against persecution.
They're not.
Who could argue with that, Matthew?
Well, look, I think just on the wider question of celebrities,
those people are very glad he's speaking up for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gary Lineker's been on a political journey because obviously he was apolitical when I was young and he was in his footballing
played
prime.
football, yeah,
absolutely. And clearly he's got more political. I mean, Carol Vorderman's the one who gets me because when I worked for the Labour Party, she was a Tory endorser.
Exactly.
And now she's the Queen of Woke.
We've all been on a journey, dear.
Yeah, she's a shapeshifter.
The people I have real respect for are the people who've
Sounds like an exercise.
Who stayed backing a political party all the way through. I mean, there was when you're doing an event with the leader of your party, you have a sort of a pre-recorded celebrity voice to introduce them. And I can tell you, by the end of the Blair Brown years, we were and Iraq and all the lovies had left. We were down to about 2 people. Richard Wilson and David Tennant would still let us use their voices right at the end. So there's people who've started. Eddie Izzard. I know not everybody loves him. You love him or loathe him.
He is a man.
I'm not going to be cancelled.
Not another suspension.
She's a committed activist. She sticks by what she says.
Yes.
Why doesn't Lineker go on a political programme, like this, like one of these shows, and have his views challenged?
You know why? With facts. Well, Gary Neville wants to be mayor of Manchester.
Well, yeah, there's another joke.
Good luck to them.
Good luck to that.
Listen, you don't keep Kelvin McKenzie waiting. We need to crack on. Thanks to my brilliant panel for their views. What do you think? Should Elton John and Gary Lineker be commenting on our border policy? Mark at gbnews.com. My pundits are going to nominate their Greatest Britons and Union jackasses very shortly. But next in Uncancelled, is Rupert Murdoch's media empire about to dramatically switch support to Labour? And could that decide the next election? I'll be asking the former editor of The Sun newspaper, Kelvin McKenzie. Plus, Kelvin's not happy about those striking doctors. He's on fire, and he's hearing too.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's time now for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Tonight, Rupert Murdoch's UK papers could switch allegiance to Labour at the next election, according to the media mogul's biographer. Michael Wolff dramatically claimed that Rupert Murdoch may decide to back Sir Keir Starmer's bid for Prime Minister if he's going to be a certain winner. Well, to discuss this, let's speak to the former editor of The Sun newspaper when they sold millions of copies today, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, how significant is Mr Murdoch's support in 2023, 2024?
Non-existent. It doesn't matter anymore. Actually, it's difficult to say even in my time, when actually we probably had 12 million readers, and when we said vote Tory, we took the credit for it, but I had no idea actually whether it had the slightest bit of impact.
Did you put Kinnock in the light bulb?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, of course, was a piece of genius which continues to haunt me. And so the bottom line, it doesn't really matter what they say. However, there are a whole series of endorsements which party leaders are looking for. And were the Sun to say vote for Starmer, by the way, that would be a... If you're watching, Rupert, which I very much doubt because it's probably past your bedtime, but if you are watching, right, don't do that, whatever you do. If you're going to do it to any other papers, get the Sunday Times to support Starmer because nobody reads the Sunday Times and nobody cares. But the Sun does matter and the Times does matter. So I'm hoping that he does something. Actually, Rupert only ever does something which he thinks is in his commercial interest. So if he can work out whether there's a bottom line plus for him, he'll do it. So I'm just hopefully won't ask Sun reader because that will have a damaging effect on the Sun going forward.
For example, the Sun, by definition, should be anti-woke, right, against political correctness, against the idea you can't define.
But it has changed a bit. They're trying actually to keep the advertisers, and if you want the advertisers, you should be as woke as you like. So actually, the stuff that's in the Sun is pretty. I think Andrew Neil, who I don't normally agree with, described it as milk and water, and that's probably what it is.
Yeah, too right. What about those doctors on strike? Can it be justified?
Sure. But none of the doctors. What about the consultants? What a disgraceful mob that lot are, right? They make 137 grand a year on average, plus their private work, so they combine with the doctors to grind it to the patients. And some of these hospitals are literally, they can't treat anybody, no matter how ill they are. So then the consultants are saying, pay us 9 grand for a shift, or 7.9 thousand for a shift. Or there's a hospital, I know the hospital in Margate, a shocking place, by the way, shocking place, East Kent Hospital.
The hospital, not Margate.
Well, actually, funny you should mention that.
I think it's very colourful there. It's a thinking man's Whitstable.
It could be, but it probably needs a lick of paint before it comes to that. So the idea that individual shifts that people are making... So they're using...
Are you telling me almost £8,000 for one shift?
Almost 8 grand for one shift.
Possible?
Well, it was a neurology department at the Wharton Hospital in Liverpool, and the other one was a Margate Hospital, which was like £6,500. And this came after pressure, actually, given their credit from the Times, to find out what was going on there. And what the doctors say is, if you want us, you're going to have to pay us quadruple, 10 times that. And actually, if the hospital is desperate, they'll pay it. The question is, it's our money. It is actually taxpayers' money.
Correct.
And so these doctors, they don't give us stuff. They'll use any kind of pain, any kind of blackmail. I'm surprised they don't join the RMT. They could be fantastic train drivers, couldn't they? Because what they could do is they drive their train halfway between a station and then charge 9,000 quid to allow the passengers out. That's the kind of trick which these consultants do. It's a disgrace. They are unhappy that they don't make as much money as lawyers.
But let's not forget, you were the editor of The Sun for many years. You founded Talk Sport. You're worth a few bob yourself.
It's kind of you to mention that.
You're a man of means. Therefore, everybody wants more money, don't they? And these consultants would argue that they've had a real-term pay cut. So why shouldn't
they argue that. I have no idea whether any of that is true. It's just another... It's like listening to any other trade union leader. So are you shocked that consultants will act in this way, or is this quite normal in your household? So they'll use your mother's pain to get their pay up. Isn't that a surprise to you? Is that a surprise?
Don't you want to be paid what you feel is a fair amount?
Well, why don't... OK, right, the NHS is a unionised monopoly. I'm absolutely in favour they can earn as much as they bloody like. Let's start another system where we pay insurance alongside it. So if you're skint, you'll still get treated by the NHS, God help you, right? And then other people who have some money will have some decent doctors.
Well, yeah, and something, the elephant in the room that isn't discussed enough, especially probably in The Guardian, is that these strikes will cost lives. We somehow went into a brand new territory where nurses and doctors down tools. And perhaps it should be like the military where you can't strike.
I would be in favour of that. Right, I would absolutely be in favour of that, and I'd enjoy seeing the row, and I'd love Sunak to take them on. Why do you think Sunak is only 10 points behind, despite the catastrophe that the last few years have been for the Conservatives? Because he's finally giving that to the normal political views of the country.
What is that? Is there a word for that?
Well, GB News have actually kind of encapsulated it, actually. And the more he does of that, the more he will win in the polls.
So you think he's actually, briefly, Kelvin, he's in with the shout in a year's time, isn't he?
I think it'll be a distant shout. I think it'll be a long way down the valley. But at least he's giving himself a hope. If it had been Trust or Boris, they would have been absolutely stuffed.
Home and hose. Kelvin, you do have... We're out with the clocks. We're done, right?
OK.
But you've got an issue. You're attacking all these doctors, right, and the consultants.
Yeah.
What happens when you go in for a nip and a tuck, OK?
Can I say I've just paid...
The bum lift. Get the old bags under the eyes sorted out.
The size of my bum, they probably need a JCB for it, to be honest.
They're going to be a little bit clumsy, aren't they, after all of this?
Well, that is true. I just paid 250 quid for a top heart surgeon to tell me that there was nothing wrong with me. Right? I said, if I give you 500, what will I do?
Kelvin Mackenzie, alive and kicking. Kelvin, thrilled to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
I hope you'll be back in a week's time, and I think later in the week as well. Let me tell you that Professor Phil Banfield, chairman of the BMA Council, has said doctors are fed up of being told that we're the problem with the NHS. Wanting to be valued for our expertise, the same as we were in 2008, is not a radical demand. In fact, it's essential to having the workforce needed to bring down waiting times. OK, let's get now to my pundits and their greatest Britons and Union jackasses. And let me start with you, Carol. Who's your greatest Briton?
OK, mine is the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, who has announced today that she's going to ban smartphones in schools during the day.
Hooray.
And the rest of us are screaming, why has it taken so long? You know, they've now studies have found that kids can't focus, they're distracted. It's also to help stop bullying in schools. One study said that when a kid receives a bad notification from someone on their phone, it can take 20 minutes and upwards for them to get over it, for them to concentrate again.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's a great move. Take them off them, give them back at 4 o'clock.
Common sense at last. Matthew, your greatest Briton.
So mine is Pat Arrowsmith, who was a peace campaigner who's died over the weekend, aged 93. She's one of the founders of CND, and so you might think it's an unusual one for me to pick on GB News. I actually don't agree with her on many things and many of her tactics, but she was a very brave woman, and particularly she was the first person ever to list their lesbian partner in Who's Who. She was a trailblazer.
Oh, she was, and may she rest in peace. Belinda, your greatest Briton.
Mine is Priti Patel today. She used a speech last night at the CDO Gala dinner during Tory party conference to champion, defend and support GB News and to highlight the important role this channel has in the democracy of our country and giving viewers the other side of the story. And she also really praised Nigel Farage in her speech, so I'm a big fan of hers today.
I was delighted that Priti Patel gave so much support to GB News. She could have had a drink at its conference, but we do appreciate the positive words. Also, I will say now that my winner is going to be Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary. There should be no place for mobile phones in an educational setting. OK, let's power through your union jackasses. Briefly, if you can, Carol.
Mine is all cyclists who badgered the government to spend billions so they could get their own lanes on the road. They pushed us off. They caused massive congestion. Guess what? Latest Department of Transport figures, Cyclists aren't that bothered about cycling anymore. We're back to pre-pandemic levels, so all those lanes are now standing empty and our roads are knackered.
Oh, I love the cyclists. I think they're saving the planet. An unpopular
no, they think they are, but they're not.
OK, how about you, Matthew, your Union Jack?
He's a nasty chap called Dale Houghton, Sheffield Wednesday fan who pleaded guilty and faces jail after mocking a little lad, Bradley Lowry, who was Sunderland's football mascot, who died aged 6 a few years ago. And he's now... This guy was mocking him at a match at the weekend and is facing jail. Pretty despicable.
Horrible stuff, Belinda. Briefly, if you can.
Very quickly, yeah, mine is Jeremy Hunt for not using his speech as an opportunity to cut taxes or even give hope to anyone that taxes were going to be cut. And I think that's a bit of a betrayal of Tory voters.
OK, well, I'm going to give it to Matthew because let me tell you that Dale Houghton made a big error of judgment. I'm back tomorrow at 9. Headliners is next. Thanks for your company.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bright and breezy sums up tomorrow. A bit of a grey start in the south, and there will be some showers, particularly across the north and the west. Overnight, some pretty heavy rain moving in. A very soggy one out there right now, thanks to this area of low pressure. Some intense downpours, even the odd rumble of thunder likely over the Midlands and eastern parts of England over the next few hours. Could be very wet indeed for a time across parts of Norfolk especially. But that all tends to scoot away through the early hours. Many places will become dry, certainly across Scotland and Northern Ireland, some clear spells. A little chilly here, down to single figures, but staying quite mild across the south. Temperatures may stay in the teens in the capital, but quite a grey start to Tuesday. Still some outbreaks of rain over the East Midlands, East Anglia and the south east, potentially still around for the rush hour. Gradually pulling away through the morning, then brighter skies, showers for western Scotland, parts of northern England, a few for Wales and Northern Ireland too, but much of the south and east having a largely dry afternoon. A fresher feel, temperatures mostly in the mid-teens at best, and similarly